If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. You are listening to the Columbine Conspiracy Series. I'm your host, Bruce McGuire, and this is episode 13, The Multiple Shooter Theory Final Verdict. We will take a look at what all of these accounts mean. How many specific different type of shooters were described? What were the circumstances? What are the circumstances of the ever-changing testimonies? What were the circumstances of the so-called interviews? How much coercion was exercised by the so-called investigators simply seeking to wrap up a case? All of this and more on the Mindshock podcast. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal, help support the channel, help us get more mind-shocking content out there with logic and reason at the forefront. Just check the link in the description. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, make sure your loud device have those notifications come through. If that still doesn't work, you could just go to youtube.com/Mindshock to check for the latest updates. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Okay, so regarding Stephanie Haney, this is page 834 of the Columbine report. Stephanie Haney told me that although she had told investigators Shoshke and FBI agent Atanasio she had never seen the third person prior to April 20th, she told me she now believes she has seen him prior to the shooting that occurred at Columbine. Stephanie told me Mark Maines is a trenchcoat mafia associate and said that he lives or lived in the subdivision, which is north of West Chatfield Avenue and east of South Pierce Street. She says that possibly during December 1998, she saw this described third suspect at Mark Maines' house with him. Stephanie told me at that time the third person had long hair that he wore slicked back from front to back. Stephanie said this third person was taller than Dylan Klebold or Eric Harris. She said he was approximately 19 to 20 years of age. Huh. Very, very strange is all we could say about that. Now, the final point here we're going to go over is witness intimidation. So, obviously, we went over that in all the previous accounts, how the gaslighting started taking place in the follow-up interviews. Alright, so let's do a quick summary of all of the possible other individuals being involved here. This was posted December 31st, 2016 by a guest on the ColumbineMassacre.forummotion.com forum regarding additional shooters. I'm a strong believer in there being multiple shooters and that more people were injured, killed than the media tells us. Remember, we can't always trust the media. Look who owns them. So many witnesses claim there were multiple shooters. I'm a strong believer that Perry and Morris were shooters and that there was a rooftop shooter. The additional suspects of Columbine. This is a partial list of other people named by witnesses as being additional shooters or somehow involved in the attack. Most of these people were interviewed by police who cleared them as suspects, claiming they had alibis. It turned out the alibis in question were not as strong as the public had been led to believe. For example, most of the alibis are the mother or close friend swears the person was at home with them variety. Other suspects listed have never been identified but were cited by multiple witnesses. Eric Harris, known shooter, identified by witnesses. Dylan Klebold, known shooter, identified by witnesses. The BMW gang. Circa 40 minutes before the shooting, a construction worker claimed he spotted a BMW matching the description of Klebold's car with 4 occupants do a U-turn in front of the school. Chris Morris. Morris was claimed, and not the only guy, there was a couple other individuals who corroborated that we went over. Chris Morris. Morris was claimed by several students to be the leader of the so-called Trenchcoat Mafia. He was named by several witnesses as being a shooter and was actually taken into police custody before being released. Morris's alibi is that although he was at school in the morning, he cut class and went to a friend's house to play video games prior to the start of the shooting. Morris also claimed to have gone to the before-school bowling class on April 20th, but his name does not appear on the roster. Morris's mother was a police officer. Apparently, he was also kicked out of the home right after. Robert Perry. Multiple witnesses named him as being a shooter. Perry was a trench coater, but had graduated or dropped out the year prior. Perry was in the habit, or months prior, was in the habit of spending time at the school to visit his friends. Perry had horrible acne at the time, and this was a consistent feature described by witnesses. Of all the witnesses who actually named an additional shooter, the majority of the witnesses named Perry. I think it was over 60 individuals or so. Perry's alibi is, like most of the people named as additional shooters, his mother, now deceased. Brian Sargent, not identified by name, actually he was, but several witnesses described a person extremely similar to Sargent, a short, chubby, fat shooter with a round face. Sargent is important as circa a dozen witnesses described an overweight shooter. Neither Harris nor Klebold were overweight. In fact, Sargent was reportedly the only member of the trenchcoaters who was overweight. Sargent's alibi is that he was hanging out with friends after going to a local Burger King. It is not known how far the police checked out the alibi or whether they just accepted it at face value. Joe Stair, identified by name as being involved by several witnesses. However, no witness actually observed him to be holding or firing a gun. I think there might have been one, though. At least 5 witnesses heard other shooters say the name Joe. At least 2 of the witnesses said a phrase similar to Joe, I have 3 of them in here, was made by other shooters. Mrs. Mikesell, an employee at Columbine High, advised police that several students came and told her that Joe Stair had been seen in the school during the shootings. Like Perry, Joe Stair was not a current student of Columbine High. Stair's alibi is that he claims he was at home with his mother until he left to pick up his sister at the library circa noon. There is no indication Stair's mother or sister were ever interviewed by police to either confirm or deny Stair's alleged alibi. In 2007, Stair was found hanged to death. Some speculate that it was not a suicide, as Stair's body was found with a bloody nose and with blood on the floor. Interestingly, Stair died shortly after he began posting on a message board dedicated to the Columbine tragedy. Eric Dutro, trenchcoater. At least one witness claims the shooter she saw may have been Dutro. Nate Dykman, best friend of Dylan Klebold, more info to come. Eric Veik, friend of Dylan Klebold, helped to make videos with Klebold and Harris, was not identified by witnesses as being a shooter, however, was the person who put the thought of the day reading Bet You Wish You Weren't Here Today on the school's monitors. Veik was arrested in October 99 for allegedly threatening to perform a repeat of April 20th. Veik was also investigated by police in conjunction with an alleged plan to blow up another school. Actually, now's a good time to finish up with Eric Veik, because we never actually finished up with him. So let's look at the trouble he got into. So here is an assortment. This was posted on RitaGleason.com, claims about the thought of the day. And she presupposes that it's a myth that Eric and Dylan arranged to have a message foreshadowing their planned attack broadcast on the Morning Rebel News Network. And so she buys, Rita Gleason just buys that it was referring to the weather. She states on her website, Eric Veik, who wrote the message, was a friend of Klebold and Harris and had worked on video productions with both boys in the past. The phrase that Veik aired on April 20th was a last-minute substitution for one he felt was unstable and read, "How could you expect us to stay in school on a day like this?" The originally scheduled phrase, "quit your bitching," was written by a senior who told Veik that he didn't care if the phrase was inappropriate because he'd be graduating in a few weeks. Although I don't believe that was corroborated. I think that's what Veik had said, but I don't know if they actually nailed down the person who said that, and I don't know if he claimed to have said that. Despite the many individuals who remembered a more ominous quote of the day, some remembered and understood the intention of the actual quote. I mean, is there not a way to get a definitive on this? So, page 49, today is not a good day to be here. Page 124, she did not see the announcements but was told by another student in class. It stated something to the effect of, "Today is a bad day to be here." Page 155, "You don't want to be here." 230, "Don't you wish you weren't here today?" 281, "Not going to be a good day." 632, "You wish you weren't here." 657, "Today's the day you wish you weren't here." 668, "Today's the day you wish you weren't here." 848, "I'll bet you wish you weren't here today." 1013, "You would rather not be here." 1295, "Today will not be a good day." 1325, "What a horrible day to come to school." 1342, "You wish you weren't here today." 1404, Discussed with a friend, there was a big 420 on the screen and the screen would shake. They thought this was unusual. 1419, you wished you weren't here today. 1503, today's going to be a bad day. 1531, today's the day. 1558, 420, you'd rather not be here today. 1640, today's a bad day. 1664, you wish you weren't here. 1794, something to the effect of, today is not a good day to be here in school. 1865, something bad going to happen in the school. 1932, you wished you weren't here. 2019, 420, wish you weren't here. 2021, I'll bet you wish you weren't here today. 2121, you don't want to be here today. 42099, 2270, I'll bet you wish you were not here today. 2275, this will not be a good day. 2306, I know you guys don't want to be here. 2529, today is not going to be a very good day. 2596, something to do with it not being a good day to be at the school. 2608, 420, I wish I wasn't here. 2653, wish you weren't here. 420, 420. On page 2658, someone believed the thought of the day was go to lunch. 2732, you'd wish you weren't here today. 2796, wish you weren't here. 2980, 3001, you shouldn't be here. 3031, today's going to be a really bad day. 3151, you'll wish you hadn't come today. 3185, 3186, don't you wish you weren't here today? 3217, today is not a good day to be here. 3289, you do not want to be here today. 3405, you don't want to be here. 3411, this is not a good day to be here. 3456, today is not a good day to be here. 3515, this is going to be a bad day. 3460, you'll wish that you weren't here today. 3528, don't you wish you weren't here today? 3538, good day to not be here. Don't you wish you weren't here? 3556, you don't want to be here today. 3635, I bet you wish you weren't here. In really small text. Someone remembered it in super small text. 3723, you don't want to be here today. 3735, you shouldn't be here today. 3771, don't you wish you weren't here? 3801, I bet you wish you weren't here. 3808, yes, I bet you wish you were not here today. 3954, you don't want to be here today. 4141, someone said in one of the classes it was not a good day to be here. 4190, you'll wish you hadn't come today. 4277, wished you weren't here today. 4467, today is not a good day to be here. 8928, I bet you wish you weren't here today. 420. 2072, how can you expect us to be in school today? And some believe it was referring to the nice weather, which is, of course, very, very convenient. But basically, the majority of quotes seem to be, you wish you weren't here today, or today is not a good day to be here, or you don't want to be here today. Something like that. The gist is clear. Now, let's see some quick background on Eric Veik. He states he first met Eric Harris, Dylan Klebold in a video production class they all had together the previous semester, fall of '98. Eric was in the first hour class with Veik, and Dylan was in the same class during the second hour. Eric Veik stated the teacher had put the students in groups and given them assignments for video production. In Veik's group was Eric Harris and Mike Vendegnia. Dylan often joined the group in brainstorming sessions to come up with ideas for the videos. Eric Veik stated that Dylan would often drop by their first hour class in order to talk with Eric Harris. He said that there were 3 to 4 productions made. CHS Highway Patrol, Car Wax commercial, Hitman for Hire, originally titled Revenge for Hire, and then Radioactive Clothing. And there were also a couple of intro videos filmed for the Rebel News Network, RNN. Veik stated that the phrase of the day from RNN was, how could you expect us to stay in school on a day like this? That's kind of weird because that's really not what was reported by just about anyone. Everybody reported something slightly different. Is it possible Veik wanted to make it a little bit more innocuous? I don't know. He stated the original phrase was made by James Davis, a senior. The phrase was quit your bitching. Davis told Veik he didn't care if it was inappropriate because he was going to be graduating in 16 days. Veik went ahead and changed the phrase because he felt it was inappropriate. And again, I do not know if James Davis verified this or corroborated this in any way. All right, moving on, let's look at Veik's Vengeance. This is a post also made it on the ColumbineMassacre.forummotion.com forum by a guest. Some concise bullet points account about Veik from the 11K documents. Veik rode to school with Harris, worked with him in video class, and reportedly seemed to idolize him. On 420, he was the author of The Thought of the Day. Fall 1999, he was removed from Columbine High School for making comments which were construed to be a possible threat of a repeat on April 20th. Document 10925. On May 11th, 1999, 12:05, I was contacted by investigator Don Estep, who had information a student at Chatfield High may have had in his possession enough gasoline and flares to blow up Chatfield High School. The student identified was Eric Veik. Investigator Estep told me he was contacted by Lieutenant Dennis Potter, who spoke with the mother of John Ungerland, who had a conversation with Eric the day before about being able to blow up Chatfield High. Veik was investigated for this incident but not arrested. On October 20th, a 17-year-old Columbine High student, Eric Veik, was arrested and jailed with a bond set at an astronomical $500,000 on the night of October 19th on charges of inciting destruction of life or property and theft for allegedly stealing a school microphone. Wow. You steal a microphone, you get jailed with a $500,000 bond. Officials were given word of the student's plan, which included a diagram of the school and other writings by a fellow student who heard him say he would finish the job. Okay, but that's not. That's not cited. What he was arrested for, inciting destruction of life or property. That's inciting. Wouldn't that be a threat? So why theft for allegedly stealing a school microphone? That's what they listed on the report. Why not list? This is weird. He would finish the job in the wake of the April 20th tragedy by initiating another shooting. He said something recently about how he craves attention, that he'd do pretty much anything to get attention. Said Mike Casey, a classmate who has worked with the suspect on the school play. I said, not what Eric and Dylan did, and he kind of laughed, and that was the end of that. What? Wait, that was the threat? Wait, what? I don't get it. The allegation stemmed in part from a 12-page diary reportedly found among his possessions at school that contains threats of violence. Okay, that would be a little bit more substantial if those are explicit threats. Friends say the teen was reported to school authorities last year. After Columbine students had resumed classes at nearby Chatfield, they said he made some inappropriate remarks about the massacre that were overheard, prompting the district to suggest he did not return for the rest of the year. Some parents had been notified of the arrest on Tuesday evening. He didn't seem like a kid that would do anything dangerous, said fellow student Jeffrey DeMana, 18, who was in the video class last year with the boy. DeMana said that the teen spent a lot of time with Harris and Klebold. They sat at the same table in class, he said. They were always together. The boy is scheduled to return to court Friday. He was held in Jefferson County Jail before a judge Wednesday ordered him moved to a youth detention center. The boy's family declined to comment. He is under suicide watch, county officials said. Jefferson County Sheriff's officials said the boy told another student he would finish the job started by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Wow. Continuing on with the forum post here, I do think Veik was very hurt and confused when Eric and Dylan did the deed and in a sense ditched him. According to Devin Adams, Veik wasn't really considered a friend by Eric and Dylan. They just sort of used him as they knew he was the go-to guy for many aspects of their video projects. From Veik's POV, he assumed he was a part of Eric and Dylan's little club against the world. I also tend to think that Veik was nursing the same sorts of hidden frustrations and anger as Eric and Dylan. Like Eric, he was small in size and undoubtedly bullied and considered that tag-along dork with the video camera, trailing after the trenchcoat mafia Ramstein boys. Sadly, he didn't get a whole lot of respect with even those he identified with as his friends simply used. Veik was the guy that got bumped holding the camera when the jocks crashed past Eric and Mike V in the Eric and Columbine video. I get the strong impression that Veik really looked up to Eric's bold anti-hero style. He idolized him. I suspect that Veik had a boy crush on Eric even. Veik was stunned when Eric and Dylan finally pulled off what they had been inside joking about for some time, and of course, right in earshot of Veik, who never quite took them seriously, just like everyone else. He joked and played the game with them. Then one day, it happened. I know in one news video, Veik was in tears, sniffing in his news interview. To paraphrase, he knew them. Eric and Dylan were not like that.
I did not think they would actually do something like this. And it was not in their normal nature to conceive or go through with what they did yesterday.
Veik had a hard time processing all of it. He felt completely ditched and betrayed by his pals and just massively confused and devastated by it all. I suspect that since he harbored the same outcast frustrations as Eric and Dylan on some level, he wished they would have included him in the plan. The angry part about him was sore about it, and he thought we were a team, weren't we? He felt cheated by them. Eventually, he kind of lost it and decided it was his turn to attack the school and finish the job his friends started. So he went about his mini-attack recklessly and haphazardly. Veik even openly bragged to students that all the security put in place after Columbine wasn't enough to stop it from happening again. Veik was so angry, bereft, and depressed, and so unable to process all of the mixed emotions that he morphed into a copycat, attempting to follow in his friends Eric and Dylan's footsteps. Man, just imagine the $500,000 bond after his little breakdown. I've seen a somewhat recent picture of Veik. He's still in theater video production as a career, at least at the time of the photo, and it's on a company website. Can't recall offhand. He looked happy in the snapshot. I just wish we could get a snapshot of him now in retrospect about his experience. But these associates have burrowed so deep into the woodwork in hopes to put Columbine and their association with Eric and Dylan behind them forever. Still, it would be a worthy contribution to society to take their past suffering and put a new positive spin on it as a survivor. These folks have 15 years put behind them and able to check in with them if they have the courage to come forward. Would be helpful to examine and identify how an average teenager finds himself on a downward spiral of a next future school shooter. Okay, so that's Veik's account. Another post here on this forum. Veik has always been an interest to me. It was already shocking that the shooting was carried out by 2 people instead of 1, allegedly, and Veik makes for a third person who potentially could have participated under different circumstances. The fact that it just wasn't a lone mentally deranged perpetrator shows the kind of environment these kids were living in, as well as the thought processes of teenage boys in general. However, I still wonder about these allegations. I've heard stories of several other Columbine High students being removed from school due to questionable comments in the wake of the massacre. With the hypersensitive environment at the time, even mentioning Columbine was the equivalent of yelling bomb in an airplane. I'm curious about the journal police retrieved and if it reveals a more serious plan. I'm inclined to believe the things he said were watched much more closely than others due to his previous association with Eric and Dylan, and even harmless words were taken seriously. So did he spend a year? Wow, he spent a year. Someone posted that he spent about a year in the juvenile detention center. Those must have been some serious threats then, and not just random musings in the journal. Another post here. Veik is like the overlooked underdog of the whole thing. If you think about it, he's much more of a loser than Eric and Dylan, really. He ended up forgotten. Even the boys felt more superior than he was, and he wasn't cool enough to them to be part of NBK. The betrayal that he felt post-Columbine is a little hard to grasp because I think in his head, he felt like he was left out of a suicide pact or something. He probably wanted to be as dead as his friends were. I do agree and share your sentiment. Right after Columbine, everything was so fragile, any bit of possible harm will be harped upon so fast. So there you have it. That's Veik's account. I mean, bizarre, but again, as I stated earlier, if I had to just simply take a wild guess at the first individuals to be eliminated from the Trenchcoat Mafia Associates list of possible involvement or assistance, I believe Eric Veik and Brooks Brown would probably be the most, because even if they told Veik to put that thought of the day on, why would they, there's no reason to believe that they would have told him what was really going to happen. So even if other individuals knew, other than Eric and Dylan, or Eric and Dylan themselves told him to put up that phrase of the day, he might have been protecting them, because if they did told him to put up the phrase and he put it up, he would find himself in even more trouble probably. Would it be easier for him to just say he just thought of it because it was nice out? or a marijuana joke. Again, it's hard to say, but even if Eric and Dylan told him to put the phrase up, that doesn't mean he knew about their plan in any way. Because especially if they phrased it as a marijuana joke or Hitler's birthday, whatever the case may be. Also, Brooks Brown, in their 2 interviews, Eric Veik and Brooks Brown seem to be the most devastated, unless they're just that phenomenal of an actor, which I think Brooks Brown was an actor, and everybody said he was a phenomenal liar, so who knows? But either way, you have all these other individuals. I don't know if there's an interview with Heckler or some of these other guys, but I would say Eric Veik, Brooks Brown could probably would be the first to be eliminated if you're looking for other accomplices of any type, whereas Joe Stair smiled straight through his interview in April. And also Chris Morris just deadpan in any of the footage. Zach Heckler, I don't know if there was an interview to gauge any kind of reaction, but he seemed like he possibly distanced himself away as well. Nate Dykman, another big question mark. A lot of unanswered questions. Very possible he tried to talk them out of the shooting while it was occurring and failed. And maybe he believed he would be blamed as an accomplice, so he got out of there. Is he the fire truck guy? Maybe, maybe not. And, or he's completely innocent. Either way, he got out of Dodge immediately. And again, that doesn't mean he was guilty in any way. That just means he kind of, or him and his father, stepfather, saw which way the wind was blowing, and they just kind of didn't want to be there for that, which is understandable as well, innocent or guilty in any way. Then you have guys like Chris Morris, Robert Perry, Brian Sargent, Joe Stair. Those are the big ones. It's hard to say for certain. Obviously, this is Mindshock. We don't allege anything is true or untrue. The only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. But Eric Veik just really does not... I mean, again, obviously we don't really know. But who knows? Let's go back to this list here. So the Splatterpunks, Matt Nolte, Matt Accard, and Jim Brunetti. 3 young men who were not students of Columbine who were arrested by the police in the field outside of the school. They were friends of Eric Harris. At least one witness placed them in the school the morning before the shooting. This trio were also cited by at least one witness at nearby Clement Park as well. According to Sheriff Stone, the 3 claimed they came to the school to check the scene out after hearing of the shooting on the radio. According to Stone, there were no reports on the radio at that time. The trio allegedly gave alibis involving parents or being in the company of each other and were quickly released by the police. And the splatterpunk angle, I mean, that's just an angle that's not really explored, but it is curious because unless you're going to say they were all on drugs or whatever, why would they be rushing to the school to help Eric and Dylan or whatever if they didn't know about it? Or were they going back and forth in some capacity? Who knows? The Balding Man, a balding man with blonde hair, a chiseled face, and a muscular body described as being in his 30s, was witnessed by at least 2 witnesses. I actually think it was a lot more than that. The unidentified man was in the company of a younger shooter. The unidentified man was mistaken by one shooter as being a police officer until she saw that he carried a sawed-off shotgun. A witness even made a sketch of this unknown man. The witness claimed police pressured her to say this man was Eric Harris, even though she knew Harris personally and knew it was not him, and we went over that as well. The round-face shooter, several witnesses describe a male with a round or full face as being the shooter, refer to Brian Sargent above. The blue jeans bomber, several witnesses describe a male wearing a white shirt and blue jeans who threw a pipe onto the roof of the school. This bomber was seen in the company of 2 other people, with most descriptions of the other 2 people as wearing trench coats. Police insist that this was Eric Harris. Eric Harris wore a white shirt during the attack, but not blue jeans. The masked shooter. Several witnesses describe a male shooter who wore a mask. The blonde-tipped shooter. At least 2 witnesses, I think it was also more than that, describe an older male shooter with shaved head on the sides of his head, longer, darker hair on the top of his head, with bleached or blonde tips to the hair. This description does not match either Harris or Klebold. The park bomber. A pipe bomb was detonated in the nearby Clement Park shortly before the start of the shootings. A witness described seeing a male with a mustache. And of course, this could have been one of the aforementioned as well. Joe Stair has a mustache. Brian Sargent possibly has some kind of mustache. Although it appears that Robert Perry, Chris Morris, Nate Dykman did not at the time, or Zach Heckler, or Brooks Brown, or Eric Veik. So, and we don't have description of some of these other trenchcoat mafia associates, especially from other schools, so who knows. The park shooter, one witness told police he saw a person hiding in the bushes while shooting a gun at nearby Weaver Park. The witness allegedly complained that he thought the police did not take his story seriously. The black-white camo pants shooter, several witnesses, including at least one teacher, described a shooter wearing black and white camo pants. Neither Harris or Klebold wore these pants during the shooting. Interestingly, in at least one video made by Harris and Klebold, there is one person who was wearing black and white camo pants. The rooftop shooter, several witnesses described seeing at least one shooter on the rooftop of the school. At least one witness claims he was told by police to keep running as there was a shooter on the roof. The German-speaking shooter, a few witnesses described a shooter wearing either a red or orange shirt, a trench coat, baggy pants, and who spoke German. It was later learned that German was spoken at trenchcoat mafia meetings. The 20-ish shooter. At least one teacher described an older shooter looking to be in his 20s and not a student at the school. One parent claimed to have seen an older 20-ish man hanging around a group of students dressed in black at the school while dropping off her daughter on the morning of April 20th. This shooter may or may not be the same as the balding man listed above. I don't think that many people would describe someone balding as in their 20s. I don't know. Duffel bag carriers. Several witnesses describe people carrying unusual duffel bags. Most of the descriptions of these people do not match Harris or Klebold. It is believed the bags containing guns, bombs, and knives used in the attack. They also missed the tie-dye shooter, the individual apparently wearing a tie-dye shirt or switching to the shirt at some point. An interesting post regarding Chris Morris. I have always thought that Chris Morris had prior knowledge. For some reason, I have always found him untruthful when giving his statement. If they had looked at my attendance for that class, they would realize I had skipped it the last month. As if to say that 100% meant he can't have any information, and then a smug smile following. I play poker a lot, and if I was against that guy in a hand and he had just raised me all in, I would call in a heartbeat. Also, if he knew it was going to happen a month out, he might have set up that alibi to start cutting that class earlier so it wouldn't just be on that day. Again, something the coincidence theorists do not consider. An interesting post here. This is a small community. I understand shock can confuse people and witness testimony is iffy. But a lot of these kids grew up together since kindergarten and straight up named these guys as being shooters. Over 40 people named them. If over 40 people saw OJ kill Nicole, that trial would have gone differently. I don't think you can ignore that much evidence. Alright, the last thing I'm going to go over is just probably the most obvious case of witness intimidation and gaslighting. We went over them in multiple witnesses who clearly named who they saw, but perhaps the most obvious is Nicole Dicky. This is a post by Government Patsy. Again, recovered on Tapatalk, dated June 2002. So just about a year after. Could it be more obvious that this girl was intimidated? In her first recorded interview conducted by Denver police on May 17th, 1999, she says she, Brian Sargent, and Frank Zerger went to the McDonald's, not Burger King, the McDonald's at lunch 10 a.m. shortly before the attack. She also states, document 6317, Dicky said that she had known Brian Sargent for about 2 years. She said that Sargent was not very close to Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold. Was this in response to question, or did she volunteer it? It echoes what Sargent told investigators, but that assessment was contradicted by the school's disciplinarian and students such as Ryan Poole, document 4709, Kimberly Carlin, 5239. Furthermore, even Sargent's other alibi witness, Frank Zerger, 7412 to 7413, told investigators that he met Harrison Klebold through Sargent, and that he'd often eat breakfast with Sargent and Klebold at McDonald's. Nevertheless, Dicky downplays Sargent's relationship with the suspects. A news story emerges in Dicky's second interview with Colorado State Patrol, May 24th, 1999. At Pierce and Polk, she was picked up by two friends, Brian Sargent and Frank Ziegler. They then drove to Burger King for lunch, so McDonald's became Burger King. She said the three of them were going to meet for lunch. In this statement and second interview, she stated that on the 20th at about 10:45 a.m., she was going to the smoker's pit when she saw Eric and Dylan, both dressed in black, standing near a duffel bag under the gazebo, which is located northeast of the school. When they saw her, they fired both guns at her. So she stated this occurred at 10:45 a.m. She said she was scared and ran to the corner of Pearson Polk where she was picked up by two friends. She said she never told anybody about this because she was scared something would happen to her. She never told the two friends that picked her up or any of the family until today. So wow. So she was shot at 10:45 a.m. by Eric and Dylan? Nobody heard that? Was she told to supplement her alibi with testimony that implicated the two suspects as lone actors in the attack? Also convenient how she has to mention the duffel bag near the gazebo. Did she provide a demonstrably false timeline position for Eric and Dylan as a means of telling investigators that she wasn't telling the truth? She impressed them on that she was afraid of what would happen to her, and later said it was because she was afraid of what they might do to her. Surely she isn't referring to the dead, is she? She repeats this bizarre story in her third and final interview, by which point law enforcement was evidently skeptical. In this rendition, Harris and Klebold were wearing ski masks when she initially saw them. When she looked north towards Columbine Park, she saw two people dressed in black trench coats and black pants. She said both were wearing black ski masks when she first noticed them. As she watched them from a distance of about 30 yards, they removed the ski masks and placed them on the table. She recognized them as Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Both of them were standing under the blue gazebo northeast of the school. Next to one of them was a large 3-foot-long green duffel bag. She said she started to walk over and talk to them. Nicole said when they noticed her, they raised pistols and fired 2 shots at her. One of the shots hit the grass next to her on the right. Nicole said she turned and ran towards Pierce Street and never looked back. Nicole said she knew Eric and Dylan from school, but they were not friends. At Pearson Polk, she was picked up by 2 friends, Brian Sargent and Frank Ziegler. They drove to Burger King for lunch. She said the 3 of them were going to meet for lunch. When asked why she did not tell anyone what happened, she said she was scared of what they might do to her. When asked why she did not tell her mother, she said after the shooting, her mother was looking for her at Leawood Elementary and could not find her. She later was able to contact her mother by telephone and tell her she was all right. Nicole said her mother was worried about her. She did not tell she had been shot at because she did not want to worry her anymore. Nicole is sure of the time and repeated 10:45 a.m. During the interview, Nicole always kept eye contact with me. Never once did she fumble for words or look around for time to think of what to say. When told she could be called before a grand jury to testify, she never blinked once. She just said, "I am telling you the truth." Wow, so that does smell of investigators trying to make it look like she was definitively painting them as the perpetrators and putting a duffel bag in their possession and neatly explaining the masked suspects that other people saw by claiming that they were wearing them and then took them off. Very curious. Other posts here. I noticed the McDonald's discrepancy as well. Anyway, a lot of these kids threw their entire stories in reverse in the second or third interview, like Alicia and Cineas. Seems very obvious that many of them were gotten to. Bizarre, but if reinforcing the two-shooter narrative was the motivation for having Dicky revise her account of what happened, wouldn't these later statements be counterproductive? Her original account seems plausible enough and provides cover for Brian Sargent, while her later statements, being as outlandish as they are, not only bring that alibi into question, but also clearly implies the involvement of others. Other posts here. I'm thinking that her giving a demonstrably false account was a means of technically complying with those who threatened her while signaling to police that she's lying. Wow, that's smart. Based on the statements about what they'd do, she appears to have wanted them to know she was being threatened. One could also construe those remarks as them trying to explain to them why she's lying while refusing to directly implicate anyone other than Harrison Klebold. That is curious and smart on both sides of the equation, especially if there's any kind of grand jury, the real truth can be brought to light at that time. Other posters here. I read through her statement again, and it's actually quite blatant what she's doing. Reminds me of the Scholes family's claims of harassment by trench-coated goons. The following in this line of thought, the reference to ski masks may have been a clue for the investigators. Come to think of it, Michael Scholes emphasized their importance as well. Village Voice, March 27, 2001. Michael Scholes, whose son Isaiah was killed in the massacre, told CRTF that when he was on the scene, everyone was talking about shooters in black masks. Someone really needs to try to find all these people, see those willing to speak on record. There are a couple who are and who have, and in both cases the statements indicate they're speaking for others as well as themselves. Even recantations would be valuable, as would actually be able to gauge their credibility. Very curious. So there you have it. We just went over through of countless accounts, over 100 accounts that don't match the narrative. There's actually even dozens more. It's just there's only so much time. And many of them are not definitive. We went over a lot of the more damning ones. Is it possible over 100 people are simply mistaken and hallucinating, even though a lot of these accounts are not done in the fog of war? They were before the situation. They were very close to these subjects. They clearly identified them. I don't know what to make of it. I really don't. I mean, the most mind-shocking thing to me, if it could be clarified, which students returned to go to school at Chatfield and then Columbine and which did not, and why. Because it's the one thing that's really hard to understand. I mean, obviously people have cognitive dissonance. Obviously people have blind faith in the cult of authority worship. So maybe those that were successfully gaslit, they truly believed there were no other shooters. So they were comfortable continuing to go to school. They were comfortable staying in the Columbine area and dealing with law enforcement as necessary. If they were successfully gaslit, what I find very curious and damning are the parents that prevented their kids from being interviewed. The particular kids that saw multiple shooters, bunch of guys, like 4 or 5 guys at a time. There's a few parents that simply did not allow their kids to be interviewed regarding that. And did they stay in the area? Did they move out of the area? I believe all of those are very curious questions, but hope all the Mindshock listeners out there found this interesting and this comprehensive and exhaustive account of possible accomplices in different capacities regarding the Columbine incident. If you enjoy the podcast, find it interesting, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share this podcast. Bring logic and reason back to a world where it's quickly becoming extinct. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case, topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire, signing off. Catch you guys